All right, let's dive right into this explainer to unpack a massive global misconception. We are constantly bombarded with numbers, charts, and percentages, telling us how a country is performing. But what do those numbers actually mean for the people waking up and living there every single day?
We so often just naturally conflate having more money with having a better quality of life. But this question sits at the very heart of today's analysis. If a nation's bank account is growing, does that automatically mean its citizens are healthier, happier, and more educated? Well, as we're about to see, the answer isn't a simple yes.
So here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll look at growth versus development, the factors influencing development, why measure economic growth, key development indices, and wrap up with India's economic challenges. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Growth versus Development.
When we talk about economic growth, we're talking about something purely quantitative. It's literally a numbers game. It measures the change in a country's gross domestic product, or GDP, over a specific period. It happens when an economy increases its production of goods and services, usually by adding more capital, labor, or advancing its technology. Basically, it is strictly about the overall size of the economic pie.
But, and this is absolutely crucial, true development isn't just about hoarding wealth. It's about how that wealth translates into human well-being. Economic development is a much broader socioeconomic concept. Yes, it absolutely requires economic growth, but it goes so much further. It looks at poverty alleviation, reducing unemployment, improving health and education, and achieving gender and income equality. I like to think of growth as the engine, right? And development, that's the destination. You can have this massive, churning industrial output, but if that wealth stays concentrated way up at the top and never actually builds a thriving, equitable community, you just have growth without true development.
Moving right along to Section 2, Factors Influencing Development.
So what does it actually take to achieve that true development? Well, the ingredients basically split right down the middle into two very distinct categories: economic factors and non-economic factors. And trust me, both are completely indispensable.
Let's break those down a bit. On the economic side, sure, we naturally think of things like abundant natural resources, strong agricultural output, and an efficient financial system to build capital. But look at the non-economic side. It's fascinating because things like ethical values and a well-functioning law and order system are listed as equally vital. Without human capital, an educated, healthy, and skilled population living in a stable society, all the natural resources in the world won't magically create true development.
Which brings us to Section 3, why measure economic growth?
You might be wondering, if development is the end goal, why are we so obsessed with tracking pure growth? Well, GDP basically acts as a nation's vital signs. It tells governments if their current trajectory is actually sustainable. Plus, practically speaking, forecasting growth lets the state estimate future tax revenues. And that's exactly what dictates their entire budget for things like creating jobs and fighting poverty. It's also kind of the ultimate crystal ball that businesses use to confidently plan their investments.
Okay, Section 4, Key Development Indices.
So how do we actually measure all this abstract socioeconomic stuff globally? The most famous scorecard is definitely the Human Development Index, or HDI. The UN Development Program has been publishing this since 1990, and it completely revolutionized how we view global progress. Instead of just obsessing over GDP, it explicitly combines three things: a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living.
Now take a look at this stark number, 132. Out of 191 countries measured globally in the 2021-2022 report, that was India's exact HDI rank. It perfectly highlights the gap we've been talking about. Even as India's overall economy grows rapidly in sheer size, translating that wealth into comprehensive, everyday human development for everyone remains a massive hurdle.
But wait, we have to add a crucial fourth dimension to the scorecard: inequality. Enter the IHDI, or Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index. Think of this essentially as a penalty score. It calculates the exact percentage of human development that a country loses purely because of inequality within its own borders.
Building right on that vital theme of equality, the UNDP also puts together the Gender Inequality Index, or GII. This one specifically exposes the economic and social gaps between genders. It evaluates disparity across three major dimensions: reproductive health, empowerment, and, this is a big one, how equally women are participating in the labor market compared to men. And that leads us to our final major index, the World Happiness Report. Published by the UN Solutions Network, this one is super interesting because it wonderfully factors in deeply subjective human experiences. It doesn't just look at GDP per capita and healthy life expectancy, it actually weighs a society's generosity, their social support, the freedom to make life choices, and even how the public perceives corruption.
And on this particular happiness scorecard, reflecting those exact 6 variables, India landed at 136 out of 150 countries tracked back in the 2022 report. Once again, this paints a picture that goes way beyond raw economic output, giving us a real glimpse into the lived experience of the population. Finally, Section 5, India's economic challenges.
When we look at the reality on the ground for India, some pretty severe roadblocks emerge. Despite having this massive overall GDP, India's immense population burden results in a very low per capita income. The workforce is severely overdependent on agriculture, and that's compounded by chronic unemployment and underemployment. Throw in a poor quality of human capital, meaning gaps in education and skills, along with a severe lack of fundamental infrastructure, and you can see why upward mobility is heavily restricted.
It's not all doom and gloom, though. The sources clearly outline a structured path forward. First up, they absolutely must drastically improve the productivity of the agricultural sector to lift millions out of basic subsistence. Second, massive, aggressive investment has to go directly into health and education. That's how you transform a population burden into high-quality human capital. And finally, boosting core infrastructure and strengthening the entire financial system will provide the physical and monetary pathways for sustained real development.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to consider everything we've unpacked today. We've seen that growth is basically just the math, right? The raw materials. Development is what a society actually builds with those materials. So ask yourself, does chasing a higher GDP mean anything at all if the health, happiness, and equality of everyday people don't rise right along with it? Definitely keep that in mind the next time you see a headline celebrating economic growth. Until next time, stay curious.